تأتيكم بعنوان العطاء لتمكين المعرفة، وتلتقي فيها الإعلامية ريبيكا ماكلوكلين المذيعة في يورو نيوز، كلا من بدر جعفر الرئيس التنفيذي لشركة الهلال للمشاريع، ودكتور شامش قاسم لاكا رئيس مجلس إدارة جامعة آسيا الوسطى، وشذا شاهيد شريك مؤسس لصندوق ملالة. فليتفضلوا إلى المنصة مشكورين. I would like to ask the speakers and the moderator to come up on the stage. Thank you.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask you to please kindly take your seats. We are about to begin our session. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to my esteemed panelists. Thank you for joining me on stage this morning at this important summit. I'm going to start by asking each of you to make a brief introduction, paint the picture of why you're here speaking on stage with me today. Shiza, let me start with you.
I have no idea. I must
This
have
is
made a
not true.
mistake. Well, I'm not sure why I'm here, but it's a privilege to be here. Briefly, I grew up in Pakistan. I've worked in the social impact sector in various capacities. Growing up in Pakistan, which is a country that is dealing with a lot of challenging social issues, has the second highest number of children out of school in the world today. I spent a lot of time working in grassroots nonprofits and organizations. When I was 18, I had the good fortune of getting a scholarship to Stanford, which was the first time that I was exposed to technology and entrepreneurship, and I became captivated by the power of entrepreneurship and innovation to make the world better. We live in remarkable times today when a girl born in Pakistan today with a smartphone and access to the internet has more information than a US president did 15 years ago. And I wanted to tap into the potential of that to make the world better. I then ended up starting an organization called the Malala Fund with Malala Yousafzai, who's a girl from Pakistan who was shot by the Taliban for wanting to go to school, and with her father Ziauddin. And that organization championed girls' education around the world. And now I focus on investing in mission-driven startups, so technology companies that make the world better with a focus on women and people of color being founders and investing in their ideas.
Thank you very much. See, this is exactly why you're on stage today. Dr. Shams, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My background is that I was born in Uganda and educated in Kenya and UK, USA, and I went to Pakistan, where my people came from the beginning. And for the last 50, 60 years, I've been in Pakistan, where I was in the business world for about 20 years, and then I went into the academic field. I became the president of the Aga Khan University, which I ran for 30 years. It's the premier medical and nursing and teaching hospital of the country. Then I decided to retire and became a minister of education, minister of science and technology. And thereafter, I was called upon by His Highness the Aga Khan and the presidents of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan to start a new university in Central Asia called the University of Central Asia. But the reason I am probably in this panel is because I founded the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy. It is a center which we can speak about a little later, but for a long time, for 15 years, I led the board of that center. And has made a huge difference, lots of lessons to be learned. Thank you.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you here today. Badr has flown in from London to be with us this morning, so a valiant effort to be with us. Please, Badr, introduce yourself.
So, Badr Jafar, I am proud Emirati national, born and raised here in the UAE. I'm probably least qualified to be here in terms of experience, but I look forward to learning from our fellow co-panelists. I'm a businessman. The business itself is called the Crescent Group. It has its roots in upstream oil and gas. It's diversified into other sectors over the years, including ports and logistics, private equity. On the sort of extracurricular non-profit side, I founded the Pearl Initiative in 2010, which focuses on the business case behind transparency and accountability, and really trying to use good governance to generate stronger economic base for job creation here in the region. And passionate about a number of other non-profit activities, some of which have already been mentioned. So great to be here.
Great to have you here. Thank you for that. I'm going to jump straight in at the deep end. We have half an hour. Let's get down to business. In terms of how philanthropy and social action, doing good, can this feed back into society? You mentioned job creation. Let's talk economics. Can it have an impact? Badr, let me start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's proven to be very effective, to act as, in many ways, a catalyst to translate private capital into public good, and to almost generate or to act as a multiplier effect on sort of business capital and also government capital. And there are plenty of examples. I mean, you mentioned job creation. One example I'll give you is a non-profit called Education for Employment, which was actually established and founded by a gentleman by the name of Ron Bruder. He was actually an American, but watching the news realized that without generating further opportunity here in the region, we risk creating a lot of discontent within the youth. So he just went and set up this foundation with some seed donation, and it's a simple model. It basically gets companies to pay for vocational training, and they've now trained in the space of 8 or 9 years over 150,000 youth. And then, of course, the companies, it goes full circle because the companies end up benefiting from higher qualified pool of talent, and of course it feeds itself. The Pearl Initiative is one that I mentioned as well, and the idea there again is relatively simple. You have a huge transition of wealth happening over the next few decades. In fact, over $2 trillion is going to pass between one generation and the next in the Gulf region alone within the next 10 years. And the majority of that transition is happening between the second generation and the third generation, so between the siblings partnership to the cousins consortium. And that's traditionally where you have the greatest destruction of value because of governance challenges and corporate governance challenges. So if we can help to embed better governance principles to protect that value transition from one generation to the other, then we have far more chance at creating new opportunity for the hundreds of millions of youth that we need to in the region. And that, of course, goes alongside all the efforts that are being exerted in entrepreneurship and SME resilience. But if we're not protecting our existing businesses from not just maintaining but also increasing value, then we're simply not going to be able to generate the opportunities that we need to in order just to keep unemployment where it is right now, which is of course which is the highest in the world. We're pushing 40% youth unemployment here in the world. So these are just a couple of examples where philanthropic capital can work alongside other forms of capital, perhaps in a blended manner, to generate that multiplier effect.
So many things to pick up on, but let me touch upon the corporate governance, the trust, the transparency. Dr. Shams, where do you stand on that?
Sorry.
Look, when people give to charity or call it philanthropy, there's a difference between charity and philanthropy. In the Quran, we are asked to give for the poor, for the widows, for the orphans, to give shelter to the shelterless. But we also are not always mindful that alongside with that, there were lots of investments made by Muslims in such things as the waqfs. There were the endowments for madrasas, endowments for hospitals, there were endowments even to run a well. Now, that's a principle of philanthropy that is often forgotten as we look at the modern era. We think that the endowment concept came from the West. It's not so. It is a very old concept from our own religious background. Now, the next question that you asked me is a very important one. How do you create trust? We were just discussing earlier that people give away their zakat or their philanthropy, and just because somebody said there is a need in Africa, they don't look what is the need, where the money went, was it into the wrong hands. So what we decided in Pakistan is that we would encourage people to give more, but they always had a mistrust. And to create trust, we created the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy, which certifies civil society organizations. And to date, we have certified 1,000 of them at very strict criteria, including how many women are employed by them, how many women are on their board, and what is the regularity of their board work, etc. And only when they get a certificate from the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy are they given tax benefit by the government. So the moment the philanthropist sees that seal of approval on the civil society organization, which is approved by the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy, then they have confidence and they give more. And that is one way we find that there is a great deal of interest in giving where the money will be well utilized. Now, every 3 years, they are supposed to be recertified, because otherwise, and they have to have annual audits done by well-known auditors. So that's the way to do one way to do it.
Thank you. Shiza, let me come to you. We've touched a little bit upon the next generation, the future giving generations. Looking at millennials in particular, what's the next frontier in positive social action or philanthropy?
Yeah, so, building upon the last question, I would say philanthropy can absolutely have an impact, but it also cannot have an impact. And it's hard to do well, and a lot of philanthropy doesn't have an impact. And I think we don't always admit that. In the startup sector, where I now work, there is almost a celebration of failure, because failure means you've learned and you've grown and you're going to build something better. In the philanthropic sector, we rarely acknowledge our failures, and I think it's important that we do so. So when I think of the role of philanthropy, it's to address the challenges that the market does not, to take on the risks that the market won't. So think about scientific research, for example. A lot of scientific research takes a long time to become market ready, but it's incredibly important to do. And philanthropy can and does and should play an important role in fostering scientific research that can then go out into the world and enter the market and eventually become sustainable or profitable. When it comes to millennials, I think that that's how they're approaching philanthropy. So the numbers show that millennials are giving. They're giving more than previous generations. But I think what's most significant is that they are catalyzing a lot more giving. And what that means is they are getting other sectors to look at how they impact the world. In particular, businesses. So more and more businesses are starting to realize that if they want to appeal to millennial customers, they have to look at their supply chains, and they have to look at their diversity practices, and they have to look at their environmental impact, and they have to stand up for something, right? So the CEO of Patagonia, for example, which is a US clothing brand, it's the official uniform of the entire tech sector. He just donated this week $10 million to environmental groups. That $10 million came from tax cuts that his company got as a result of the Trump administration. And his company has always stood up for environmental protection. So when he got that tax cut, he channeled it straight into standing up for what his company believes in. So I think that kind of behavior on the part of businesses is what's really significant. And that's being driven by millennials who are saying, I don't want to work for you if you don't make me feel like I'm contributing to something larger than myself. And I don't want to buy your products if they don't make me feel like I'm a good person. And that's the real opportunity.
Speaking of, yes, Badr, please, jump in.
Hello? Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think the signs are very positive. When you look at the cultural change in giving between, say, my generation, Generation X, and Y and Z, As has been said, higher risk appetite, which is great. It's sort of long overdue. And embracing, again, as has been said, some of the risk dynamics that you have, say, in any sort of startup environment or any incubator or accelerator. It'd be great if, and it's long overdue again, particularly in this part of the world, to have an accelerator type platform for non-profits. I mean, it doesn't exist. There are one or two, I did some research recently, one or two that exist in the US, but other than outside the US, not a single accelerator or incubator for non-profits or charities in the world. Right, so therein lies an opportunity. So that's one. Also being more comfortable with digital giving and online giving. That's fantastic, particularly while as a method of embracing transparency and data and being far more impact focused. So that trend, I think, is there, and collaboration. I think some of the woes that many large non-profit institutions face today is because of a lack of collaboration and cooperation. But again, millennials feel and demonstrate that they're far more willing to work together on various challenges. So all those factors, I think, have a very positive trend line or contribute to a positive trend line when you look at the future of philanthropy.
Dr. Shams, let me ask you, in that respect of digital and technology, how pivotal will they be in the sustainability, the future of the philanthropic industry?
There is no doubt that, like almost every industry, every social sector activity, the digital platforms are critical. It is to our peril if we don't take that into account. More and more philanthropy is now taking place online. People look at the website, decide that that's an institution that I like. Crowdfunding for brilliant ideas, not just in technology, but even in philanthropy. That is another very powerful way, and that happens through the digital technology. I give you an idea, an example. In Kenya, we started a small civil society initiative called Yetu. Yetu in Swahili means ours. And we raised in just 1 year at the beginning $1.5 million through the platform that was digital. And people said, okay, we are willing to give because now we have read about it, we know the results, and they can ask the questions as well. So digital giving is the future. It is actually now. And we will miss the boat if we don't get to that.
Shiza, let me come to you. How do we attract new talent into this space?
I think you have to do what businesses do. You have to pay them well, and you have to give them opportunities for growth. And nonprofits don't do that, right? Nonprofits pride themselves on how little they pay their people. And you're not going to get young people who are in debt because, you know, they grew up without money. They chose to take out a student loan so they could go to a big university, and they're supporting their parents, and they're not getting paid anything, and they're not being given the room to grow. You know, my first job out of college was at McKinsey, and the reason I chose to join the company was because of the way in which they prioritized attracting the best talent. And at the same time, I was going to various nonprofits, and the experience was entirely different. It was, you know, no, go get a PhD, and then maybe we'll give you an internship and pay you minimum wage if you're lucky. And then after 30 years, maybe you'll have some responsibility. And so there's a culture of stagnation in the nonprofit sector. I think we have to change that. I had the opportunity to build a nonprofit after McKinsey. I was 22. The first person I hired was twice my age, and we tried to do things differently. But I think we have to change that culture and allow people to thrive, because that's what talented young people want.
Bado, would you agree? It's time to change. We need to change the culture and pay people better.
No, absolutely. You want good people, you got to pay for it. Simple. And again, do I see that happening? Not fast enough. I think you are seeing HR departments, but also on the donor side, people recognizing that overhead is not bad. I mean, if you want something if you want to establish infrastructure, you need overhead. So rather than trying to pride, as has been said, to pride yourself on how low you're paying your people and how much little you spend on marketing and outreach and everything, and instead just focus on the impact metrics and how much are you generating in terms of bang for your buck, or return on capital employed, or philanthropic capital in this case employed. That's what businesses do, and there's no reason why non-profits should do the same thing. So it's a little bit of an oddity at the moment, but I think it's going in the right direction also.
Just to jump in, I'm not implying that we should be paying nonprofit CEOs $1 million. I think we should pay them well enough. And I think the good news is, and I find this with mission-driven businesses as well, you can get great talent at half the price for if they were working for a business where they didn't feel like they were making the world better. So you can, have your cake and eat it too. But it's important to prioritize people and growth and opportunity.
Dr. Shams, would you agree that we need to pay people well, reward them for a job well done, change the business model?
Yes, well, there is a very famous saying that if you pay peanuts, you'll get monkeys, right? So on the one hand, we want to have a work team that is managing our money well, as a philanthropy money. Secondly, we want accountability from them, and we don't want to pay them. And that's not workable. And I can tell you from the Aga Khan Development Network, which I've been associated with, we pay according to market, but a little bit less. We don't, because there is a prestige associated with being, working for a philanthropy or for a foundation. And there is value, like a university does not pay the same amount as a commercial business. But there is a prestige to being the president of a university or a professor at a university. I think for philanthropic work, there is also this satisfaction in the heart. Yes. We always forget that the most important benefit that you get out of working for a philanthropic organization is you see direct results and you feel a sense of achievement. I did something in my life. So I think we should not only pay people reasonably well, but we should hold them accountable, and we expect them to give a little more of their heart and of their mind than they would in a commercial organization.
The eternal struggle for the battle of hearts and minds, for sure. Before we take some questions from the floor, Shiza, let me come to you in terms of how do we evolve the role of philanthropy into different revenue-generating models? What would be your summary of that?
I think it's a cultural shift. I think there's still resistance to the idea that nonprofits generate revenues, that they charge people. I've seen a lot of low-cost private schools, for example, be criticized for supplementing their donations or their loans with having families pay $1 a month. I believe sometimes that can actually be really effective because it makes people feel like they're paying for it, so they value it more. Of course, it depends on the circumstance. I think it's a cultural shift. I think in certain respects, it's a policy shift because there's just regulation around what you can and cannot do as a nonprofit. So can you accept or give investment as a nonprofit? You have to find ways to do it legally, and that can be complex. So evolving what nonprofits are able to do. And then the third is to bring in people from different sectors who have different ideas and embrace new models and to give them the space to build things differently.
Thank you. We have some time for questions from the floor. If you have anything to ask, please just raise your hands. Please, the gentleman at the front. We'll bring a microphone to you, I believe. Bear with us. Is this gentleman at the front here, please? If you raise your hand, sir, so that they can see you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here today with you. My name is Imad Salim from Egypt, quality engineer. Actually, I'm so interested about our discussion today. Ms. Shazat talked about donation for non-profit organization, and of course it's a very important. But still, I can confused about how control, control this money with non-profit organization. Mr. Patrick completed with collaboration, but still we need to standards to compare without non-profit standard for collaboration. So I still confused about how control it.
How do you control what? Sorry, the standards of a nonprofit. Like how do you know if a nonprofit is good?
Yeah, in same place, and exactly the money will go in the same place we need to go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't know mostly. Some organizations do a better job than others. So, for example, Charity Water is an organization. Some people like it, some people don't. Interesting model. What they do is they raise money separately for their administrative costs from a group of private donors. So everything they raise from you, from individual donors online, goes straight into the field. And what they do is they essentially dig wells in communities, and they will tell you they have a large team of computer scientists who've built a software that tracks essentially your $10 went to this village in this, and here are the exact coordinates. And so where it went and where it ended up. So there's some nonprofits that go into that level of detail. Other nonprofits argue, that's too much detail. We should have the ability to, if I was a business, I wouldn't have to do this. I can't innovate if I'm so constrained. And then there's, official bodies like Charity Navigator is probably the best known. Charity Navigator, I think it's charitynavigator.org. They rank most charities. And then the third thing is if you go on the websites of charities, they have their financial statements. So you can read them. They're required to publish those. So you can see, it raised $1 million. This is what it paid in administrative costs. So those are three ways that you can get a better sense.
It raises the question, perhaps people are looking for more transparency. Should there be a universal set of rules and regulations that everybody must abide by so that there aren't any oligarchs, no dominating, controlling bodies without transparency, as you say? Badr?
So I think one of the most effective ways really is demand-driven. So you need donors to be demanding far better quality of data and information in terms of measurement of, impact, but also, of course, where the money goes. And if donors don't demand it, then there won't be any incentive for beneficiaries to provide that level of information. So I think it needs to start ultimately with the donors. And quite simply, there's no excuse on the beneficiary side. There's no excuse for organizations not to be able to demonstrate. I mean, if it was a business, of course, shareholders and investors hold businesses and business executives accountable for every last cent, how it was spent and how it was done. So I think it's more cultural, but I would like to see it start more with donors. And this is really something that plagues our region, particularly in faith-based giving, zakat or sadaqah. We're too removed from the dollar and cent of philanthropic capital. And I think we need to be far more engaged in the process of delivery of that capital. In terms of quality, there's someone who's now working on, and I've had a couple of meetings with them, an ISO standard for nonprofits. My only concern with it was that it was more catered for, as most ISO standards are, for much larger organizations. And what you really want to be doing is encourage smaller, particularly local NGOs, including in the humanitarian space, encourage them to be able to engage with a standard of this nature to give confidence to donors that their money is being spent well. So there are some activities there, but again, it's shocking when you consider how much philanthropic capital. I mean, even if you just take zakat and sadaqah, that's between $250 billion to $1 trillion a year. $250 billion to $1 trillion a year that gets dispersed between zakat and sadaqah amongst the 1.9 billion Muslims globally. Do we know where that money goes? Not enough. Quite simply not enough. So, but therein lies a huge opportunity. I mean, a fraction of that. The global humanitarian aid budget for 2017 was $25 billion. So 5% of even the lowest skill could actually cover all of the global humanitarian aid budget. So, lots of opportunity.
Thank you very much. We're running slightly short on time, so I'm going to just ask for a quick recap of your thoughts from our panel discussion today. In light of what's being seen as a pivotal time for the philanthropic industry, the key drivers will be power and knowledge. What needs to change now to make the biggest impact, Shiza?
In addition to everything that's already been said, I would say who has the power? I think that we need more diverse leaders, women who have a seat at the table. We need people from different cultures, different communities. We need grassroots leaders empowered to participate. And I think we need to support them with new models and new ways of giving and new ways of growing.
Dr. Shams.
It's a difficult thing to make rules. I agree with you. The golden rule is that whoever has the gold makes the rules. But the fact of the matter is that accountability by donors. I'll give you a simple example. We run a tertiary teaching hospital at the Aga Khan University in Karachi. We started zakat collection. We got $30,000, $40,000 in the first year. And we wanted to explain to people why you should give to this zakat, because all the administrative expenses of administering the zakat were borne by the hospital itself. So your zakat would go in and straight to the patient. But how do I know it is the case? So we created a committee of zakat givers and some alims who could come and who can give some knowledge, and who had some top-rate accountants in this committee. And the entire platform was on a digital basis, so a patient was evaluated very transparently. He needed a bypass surgery. This is the cost. The patient is going to pay so much or doesn't pay anything. And the transparency of the whole thing is now means every year we have at least $25 to $30 million in Karachi in zakat money coming to the hospital. And that transparency is what is required.
Badr.
I mean, we're at the Knowledge Summit, and a lot of talk about the knowledge economy. And knowledge economy is synonymous with technology, and technology is synonymous with Silicon Valley. And as I heard someone say the other day, the only place left in the world that's not trying to be like Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. So I think shifting away from technology for technology's sake and really looking at the underlying purpose behind the application of technology, I think is really important, because even if we do have a Silicon Valley created in the UAE or in the region, would that solve all the challenges that we're facing today on a daily basis in the region, from socio-economic, humanitarian, everything you can, environmental. So really embedding purpose in what we do, and this is really where I think the non-profit community and sector can really help to provide that compass point to help to channel capital, both private as well as public capital, towards generating purpose and going towards addressing the challenges that we face.
Doctor, please, you wanted to jump in.
Just wanted to add to that very, very wise comment. We are talking today about the knowledge, the future, and the youth and the future. I think one of the things that we as a society, and particularly those of us who are in the knowledge field, especially universities and schools, we owe a responsibility to bring education not from the Western standards only and Western subjects only, but there are civilizational issues and there are value sets. 1,000 years ago, Al-Kindi, the philosopher, said, we respect education because it teaches us values, not because it teaches us how to make money or to go somewhere. It's because it teaches us values. And I say that today, one of the things that, as we think about the youth and the future, if we can include in our education system the teaching of certain values that our religion, or even the cosmopolitan ethic, it doesn't have to be only Islam. There are values that other religions have as well. So if we inculcate the habit of giving, of volunteerism, or feeling for the other, and I just wanted to, I had a quote that I had a longish quote, but I'll just quote a small sentence from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. He says, "We cannot be contented at heart until we start giving." I mean, I was very struck by this particular quotation, which he gave in a speech not long ago. So I think this is, the more you give, the more you get.
It's very powerful, isn't it? Yeah, starting with giving. It's compassion, it's empathy, and there is a feel-good factor as well. Ultimately, this feeds back into the industry. Shiza, I have to finish with you. Education so close to your heart. Do you echo the words of the doctor?
Of course. The doctor has done wonderful work. I was saying, in Pakistan, the Aga Khan universities, hospitals were always, they were the standard of what we all aspired to. So it's a privilege to be here with you. Education, the fact that we still have 130 million girls who don't have access to school, I think it's one of the greatest challenges today. It's a complex challenge to solve, and I hope that people in the audience will get involved. I don't think we have the answers to how we solve this. I think a lot of people are trying different models, and I think it's a really powerful sector to get involved in.
Are you optimistic in the short and medium term, especially with education and philanthropy being very much interwoven and taught at a young age?
I am. I think that a lot is going to change in the next couple of decades. I think technology is going to change what we teach and what matters, and the job sector will entirely transform. And so I think my concern is, how do we not only help the 130 million girls who are not getting an education get an education, but ensure that the hundreds of millions who are probably being left behind in this new economy are given the skills, empathy, curiosity, creativity, resilience, entrepreneurship that they need to thrive and to excel.
Lovely. Badr, the closing words to you. What do you hope will be the key takeaway from this summit here in the UAE?
I mean, just in terms of a huge opportunity, I've said it already, but I'll say it again because it is that big. The $250 billion to $1 trillion in zakat and sadaqah dispersed every year, yet 1 in 3 Muslims lives on less than $2 a day, 1 in 3, and 90% of all humanitarian crises today in the world are happening in Muslim majority countries. And that's just an incredible disconnect between, I think, the opportunity and the reality. So that's just a phenomenal, opportunity to try and close that gap. And if something like that can come out of this conference, then that would be a great start.
We're optimistic and hopeful. Thank you very much to all of my esteemed panelists. Please join me in thanking them for their contribution this morning.